Greetings, everyone.
Okay.
Peace and love, family.
Peace and love.
Peace and love. I love that picture, Shatika.
Thank you. Thank you. It's
This one
AI
right
generated.
here. I love that picture. Ooh.
It's
Oh, it's
beautiful.
AI generated?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Wow. Them cheekbones. Woo.
That copper skin,
Yes. Beautiful, sister.
and then the ensemble with all the flowers. It's just all together
Mm,
beautiful.
the
Yes, ma'am.
matriarch.
Ashe, ashe.
All right, I apologize. All right, is everyone able to hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you, thank you. All right, peace and love, everyone. Welcome to episode number 3 of What Needs to Be Done Today, also known as the WNTBD Today Network. Again, this podcast is sponsored by the MAAT American Aborigine Tribal Nation. And as always, we want to welcome in and give honor and love to our ancestors, all never to be forgotten, always in our hearts and our spirit. Noble Theodore Scott Mitchell Bay, no longer with us in body, but always with us in spirit, and just always reminding of his support, his vision of the matriarch leading while being supported and protected by the patriarch. And that's why we're here today. And again, Noble asked each of us a very important question for our lives. What have we done? What have we done? What have we done? And that's when we're inspired to have the What Needs to Be Done Today network. And thank you all to our wonderful podcast team, Sister Carmela Mitchell Bay, Sister Shatika Killebrew Bay, Sister Anita Wills, Chief Malo and Rojo El Bay, myself, Tracy El Bay. And today we are continuing on with the roles and characters of the matriarch and our speaker, fabulous Sister Shatika Killebrew Bay. And if you are ready, Sister Shatika, the floor is yours.
Peace and love, everyone. Thank you
Peace
for
and love.
joining us here today. Yeah, like Tracy said, we're going to continue on with the topic of the roles of a matriarch. This will be my last time speaking on this topic, and what I decided to do this time would be speak from testimonies and give the insights and the places in which I've gained some of the insight that I've gained. The prior weeks we spoke on the characters, and I'm going to run those back down, different characters, just to reiterate and remind us. But from there, today would will it be testimonial, giving some openness and vulnerability to our podcast, inspiring that openness and vulnerability, because from that, that's how we're able to grow. And if instead of being vulnerable and open about it, we allow ourselves to pick up shame, it hinders us. That puts us in a place of darkness where we're not able to grow and learn from whatever we've been through. So last week, I spoke on a couple of the different traits that are needed in order to be a very impactful matriarch, and I'm going to run those back now. Patience and empathy, adaptability and flexibility, consistency and reliability, unconditional love, effective communication, selflessness and sacrifice, encouragement and support, a sense of humor, a strong moral compass, trustworthiness, self discipline, and last but not least, resilience. Sister Carmela, you wasn't here last week, but I found it ironic that that was one of the traits that was on inquiry that I found when it came to characters and traits of a matriarch. And I said, hey, that's a great way to sum it up, because that's the ultimate objective. Nobody's perfect. We're going to make mistakes. Um, the path of parenthood, whether it be patriarchal or matriarchal, is full of trials, ups and downs. We're not going to always get everything right, but we have to have the resilience to bounce back, to get back to who we are fully, rather than allowing ourselves to be changed because of the transgression. And one of the things that resonates in my head when I say that is something that the spirits told me a long time ago, that helped me to transverse life without carrying so much turmoil. But it resonates every day when I have issues. But I think it's pivotal if I share this with other people, because maybe some people don't have this outlook. But everything that we go through is for our growth. And the purpose of living, when we come into this realm, the purpose of living is growing. There is no ifs, ands, and buts about it. And if we get so wrapped up in the emotions of things, we never learn the lesson. And so Spirit said, learn the lesson, don't harbor the emotions. In which, when we do tend to harbor the emotions, we get so clouded in that position or in that situation that we're blindsided in other ways, and it does not allow us to be in our fullest self. So one of the things that I've learned through my transgressions is to learn the lesson and not harbor the emotions. The emotions rise, they come and go. And what we've learned, if you've been studying the mastering of self, you learn that emotions are energy in motion, and it comes from either fear or what is the other one that is strives or stems from? It's not just fear. I forgot what the other one is. And ignorance of something. And so when we don't know things, we tend to immediately go to a state of fear, which in return creates anger or resentment and things of that nature. But it's okay if you don't know something. I don't know if I spoke last week on it, but this is something that I want to drive home in this episode, that if you do not know anything, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to say, I don't know this. And be vulnerable. Be okay with not being perfect, because no one is. And the way that we grow is by opening our mouth and asking and inquiring and being willing to take that advice. Though you may not be able to adapt it immediately overnight, you can have it in your consciousness to where when a situation arises, you're reminded of it and you can go back to that. You can resort back to that. But if you don't take the opportunity to actually transverse, in your mind, whether or not you're willing to, despite all the fear, face whatever is coming, you cannot get the results. Something that's been resonating recently for me as well is there's no reward with no risk. And so there's always going to be some type of fear in everything that we do, but we have to not allow the fear to limit us. We cannot allow the negative aspects around fear to keep us from moving forward. And so, like I said again, today I really just want to drive home vulnerability and openness. because I know for sure that some of the things that I've learned through my transgressions of being a matriarch, of being a mother, being a provider, it came from asking questions. Because it was an unfamiliar road, it was an unfamiliar path, and it was the only way that I could get the reasonable, I thought, um, assistance and wisdom and guidance. So, um, as we always say, a closed mouth doesn't get fed. So we can't expect to be in situations and those situations be rectified if we don't ask for help. Sometimes it's okay to need help. You do not have to carry it by yourself. And objectively, that's the topic that I want to focus on. The not being afraid to be vulnerable and asking for help. And when you open your mouth and you ask, it may not come from the person that you ask for it from, but the universe will deliver. And it's ironic when we had our membership, no, our tribal directors meeting, our chief said, knocking the door shall be open. It was funny that everybody was saying that, and it's resonating back with today. The objective is knowing that if you open your mouth and you ask, that the aid, the help, whatever it is that you need will be delivered to you. But if we sit stagnant in situations, afraid, beat up, already defeated, how can we expect to win? How can we expect to come out of the situation? So I'll give a testimony, I guess, of some trials that I've had in parenting, and just how being vulnerable and being willing to accept the advice of other people has helped me. Um, I had my first child when I was 18, and I didn't know anything about having children. My second one when I was 21, and um, they were about 2.5 years apart. So I had a decent distance to know the grooming part of the toddler and infant stage, but now the training and the conditioning, I didn't know anything about that. And I remember when I was first pregnant with my first child, I was raised in church, Unity Church of God in Christ, here in Memphis, Tennessee, and it was a very great environment. It was family oriented. So if there was ever anything that I've struggled with, I always had somebody to ask or rely on for support. And I was probably about 7 months pregnant. And we were at church, and I think it was just like a casual Wednesday service, and Bible study is what they would call it. And so after church, I was talking to my first lady, and I was like, Sister LaFleur, what do I do? How do I raise a child? What are some things that you could tell me that I need that'll help me to be a better parent? And to this day, I always think back and I'm like, I wish she would have reiterated more. I wish she could have drove it home rather than just give me the words, and I was left to figure it out. But she gave me something so monumental. To this day, I still ponder on it. But she told me, and I've mentioned this prior, that let your yay be yay and your nay be nay. And I was like, okay, I get it, okay. But then when I got to age of 3 and 4 and 5 and they were older, I didn't get it. As much as I thought I understood it, I didn't understand that she was basically saying, be unpivotal. Stick to what you say. Make sure that your children know, as people would say, that fat meat is greasy. And that's what a lot of children are missing. They do not know that there are consequences to certain actions. And when they get in the world, they act so brand new to it because they have not been conditioned at home. That's one of the core physics, laws of physics that I've run into that constantly pops up. And it's a core principle in a lot of sects, a lot of organizations, and it's pivotal. But it's something that is known that there's a cause and effect, and not only is there a cause or effect, but you put energy out, that energy returns, and most of the time the return's greater. So those are like known physics, known laws. And at that age, I didn't understand. And so I was challenged because with my first one, before I had my second one, I had given him a little bit of structure where he understood yes mean yes and no mean no. But that second one, I had to financially provide now. So I didn't have as much time with him. So I wasn't giving him the core values. I wasn't setting the precedent. And I was wild. I was in the streets. I was 21 years old and I thought I was grown. and I was ready to party, ready to turn up, do whatever I could, whenever I could, because for me, that was those enjoyments of life, not knowing that there was greater things out of life. But at that young of an age, that's what you find alluring. And so I would go out and stay out, and my children would be with me, and they wouldn't do schoolwork. And morning come to go to school, and I'm like, "Come on!" And I'm holding his hand, trying to hurry up and rush him to do it. And I'm establishing bad characters, and didn't realize because of my selfish desires and selfish intent, that I didn't give them consistency. Well, my second son, he definitely didn't get the foundation of consistency, and so still to this day, he's 13 years old, be 14 in 4 days, and he tries me in every way he can because it still hasn't resonated for him that there are always going to be consequences to your actions. And that even if I'm present or not, if someone else is present or not, or if you feel as nobody sees you, it does not matter, that that energy is natural, that it is the law of karma, it is everlasting, so for me, that was monumental. And I've been challenged in the last 5 years with trying to rectify bad character traits that he has adapted because of my negligence, my lack of staying true to what my yay is and what my nay was. And I'm just now seeing the breaking of those traits and the shifting of the character. And it almost took 5, 6 years. But if I had never come into awareness of my faults and being vulnerable enough and willing to accept criticism when somebody else told me where I was faltering, then I could not have rectified my behaviors enough to stand up and give him what he needed in order to be the best him he could be. And honestly, it's perfect timing because I still have 4 more pivotal years before I send him out into the world. And I want to ensure that he has the character that's needed for self sustainability. I really don't care about conditioning him to be the greatest lawyer, the richest doctor, none of those things. I just want him to learn to fulfill self, but also have morals and values and boundaries. And now I'm trying to give him that. And for me, it took the being vulnerable enough to hear somebody chastise me, and instead of wanting to lash out and be angry because they called out my truth, actually admit that that was where I was fault and stand up and show up and rectify the behavior. And so, like I said, today for me, I just wanted to kind of bring in the energy of openness and vulnerability and share some of my issues and flaws that may give everybody else a idea of how it's okay. We're not perfect. No one is perfect, but objectively we want to strive for perfection, and we should be humble enough that when we're called in our wrongs or when we're called on an action that's not appropriate, that we rationalize enough, self-reflect, and see the truth enough to grow rather than harbor emotions and limit ourselves. So that's basically all I have to share today, in regards to the role of a matriarch, and I do believe vulnerability should be added to that list. It's not on there, but I'm sure in some way it is emphasized or kind of somewhere hidden in. But vulnerability, it's very important because I've seen it, people 30, 40, 50 years old, they failed their children and they're still unwilling to humbly admit that they have wronged them and help that child heal so that they can move forward and step into their highest potential. So, with that being said, I'm going to wrap it up and pass it back over to Tracy. Thank you all for joining us again, and I hope this inspires everyone to be vulnerable and be open, and just know that no one's perfect, but together we can create a safer and more accepting world.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Sister Shatika. That was awesome.
That was
Thank you
good.
so much
Thanks.
for that.
Yes.
And now we're going to open the floor for discussion. If anyone has any thoughts on what Sister Shatika shared, if you have any vulnerabilities, anything, any wisdom, insights, anything, questions, comments, anything that you would like to share, the floor is open.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is a new computer for me. It's not the one that I have upstairs, using something different. So, Sister Shakika, I always mess up your name, darling, but I still love you. I was thinking of something that you said about emotions and how we deal with our emotions of our children. And yesterday, I was listening to someone about raising children or uh, adults or ourselves, and they said, think about when your children were little, when they were growing up, when they got angry. In our generation, we said, we either spank them or you go sit in that corner until you deal with those anger issues. What a silly thing for us to do. What are they going to learn sitting in a corner to deal with their anger? We have to teach them to process why you're angry. How does that make you feel? Telling a 3, 4, 5-year-old to you're going to stay in bed until you're not angry again. They're never learning to process the emotion of being angry. And as adults, as matriarchs of women, we have to help them work through that process of being angry. I so remember my firstborn, that's Ashley. She was mad about something that a 3-year-old would get mad about. And so she chose to go into her room and she hit the wall and she kicked and she kicked and she kicked and kicked. And so Noble just said, well, let her wear out for a minute and then we'll go in and we'll talk. And by the time we got in there, she had certainly worn out. And we were able to help her process. Well, here's why you're angry. This may be why you're feeling that you do deserve that cookie before dinner. Um, but this is why you can't have it. And we understand the fact that you're upset. But maybe the kicking on the wall didn't solve anything. What do you think that solved? Your feet probably hurt because I did go in and tell her to take off her shoes. And she was compliant. She took off her shoes and still continued to hit the wall until that all worked out of her. But just as women who are guiding our children, don't let them experience emotions all alone and expect them to come out on the other end with how does one handle anger. So I was just thinking of my daughter Shatika when you said that, and still today she has a problem with dealing appropriately with anger. And that's something like your second born still today has some deficits in whatever we missed. So she has to learn that now, though. We have given her the tools, we've given her the skills, we've walked her through it. Now she has to dig deep within herself and take a step of growth. And so we say that a lot. So, what does a step of growth mean? And we try to, as she was younger, to tell her this is what a step of growth means in this situation and then go on to another situation. And then I was thinking about being vulnerable, and something that had happened to me the other day. Someone that I was speaking to had either something in their teeth. I can't remember if it was in their teeth or something was hanging from their nose that shouldn't be. And I've always been that person who openly said, that you have something hanging out of your nose so you could wipe it, or you have broccoli sticking out of your teeth. Now, you may not want to hear that, but it's true. I'm not going to let you walk around with something sticking in your teeth and you're talking to everyone. That's just not me. I can't do it. And when I heard you say something about openness, that's what we have to be, very open when someone tells us that we have broccoli in our teeth. And what should we do about that? When someone lovingly tells us that maybe the situation could have been handled a different way. Now, I do say, Shatika, consider the source. Consider the source, because you may tell me something and it'll go in this ear and out that ear, depending upon how you are as an individual. So I consider the source whenever I'm dealing with someone who says, Carmela, you know what? A, B, and C. You did A, B, and you didn't do A, B, and C. You went to the end of the alphabet first. So you missed a whole bunch. So just be open to what people are telling us. So that was the second thing that I did, I caught from what you were saying. And then not only to ask questions of ourselves, to sit back and to say, well, Carmela, what are you doing right now? And to be able to answer those questions. There are still people who looked alarmed when I tell them I go to counseling twice a week since Noble has passed away. And if my insurance paid for it, I would go 3 times a week. Um, because my brain needs healing. If I get sick in every other part of my body, mentally, we can become mentally ill, not mentally ill, but just the fact of being mentally ill, that something is wrong. And someone needs to help guide you and support you in getting out of wherever you are. So, those are just the 3 things I was thinking about as you spoke. Really good, though. And I did get the opportunity to listen to the first half of the tape last week. So I got all of your words that us matriarchs and patriarchs need to follow. So thank you so much for that. And I
No
yield.
problem, no problem. I think Tracy, Sister Anita had her hand up as well.
Oh, thank you. Sister Anita, floor is yours.
Yes. Thank you for sharing, Shatika and Carmela. I enjoy listening, practicing active listening when people are speaking. And as the topic is interesting because it takes me way back to when Shatika was talking, because I was young when I had my boys. I have 3 boys, and one when I was 17, the other one when I was like 22. And then I had my other son, he was Carrie, the baby. He was like 6 years younger than my second son. And my daughter, I had a daughter who was 11 years younger than my oldest son. So, they're kind of spread out, and my daughter is the youngest one. But I was the most scary part of my life was when I started having children, because I realized I was not equipped. Um, and my family was going through some stuff. My mother was going through, my father, she was separated, they were separating. And in some ways it was good for me. In some ways it wasn't good, because a lot of the time I was still living with my mother, trying to work, and, because I had a child, and dealing with the issues that were going on in the household with my mother. Not my mother herself, but other siblings that were in the house, you know. Um, and I don't think that I know I didn't handle it well, because I was still my mother's oldest daughter, and then I was a mother. So we're like 2 or 3 generations living in the same household. And I think the roles got kind of confused and stuff. And so I somewhat used what I was taught to raise my children, and that was the best I knew. And now, when I'm talking to my sons, they tell me, "Oh, Mom, don't you ever think we didn't have fun growing up? We were, don't you ever think you were a bad mother?" That's what they tell me. But I remember being scared to death of being a mother and failing my children. Um, and the other thing is that, growing up in that society, because, we're talking about how we treat the children, and we have to tell the children, what's going on in the greater society without scaring them, without disabling them from being successful in that society. And as you know, I mean, it was just because I grew up in a bubble and I didn't know about the racism. I didn't know about, dealing with certain types of people. Once I got older and I was, I had left Pennsylvania. I was in the Bay Area. And no, actually, when I was in Pennsylvania, they were starting this thing where, if you had a problem with drinking, like I had a problem with drinking, you could go to therapy, you could go to rehab and things like that. And that was just starting. And that was the first time that I was around a lot of white people. And these white people were affluent and in recovery. And I realized how screwed up they were, because if you don't see people, if you're not around people, you think, oh, these people have it easy. They don't go through what I'm going through. And some of the stories that I heard in therapy with these people is like, damn, I'm blessed. I mean, they felt, here people were sitting up, had all kind of money, houses, good jobs, and talking about not feeling loved, not being loved, the abuse that was going on within their households. And I truly felt blessed when I was, when I was able to sit there and listen and understand that these people were not perfect, and they were, not role models, and I had to look, because Satika was talking about the Church of God in Christ. That was the church that we went to. That was the church. And unfortunately, the church I went to was not, they were my relatives. They were our relatives. My father's people owned that church and ran that church. And sometimes they were nice and sometimes they were nasty, with using God to scare people and to scare us into being obedient. So, I saw that. And then now when I look back on that and I think about one of the times that we had holidays like, Christmas or Easter, and we had so much fun. And we would learn how to read, how to read the scriptures and what the scriptures meant and all this. And my learning and understanding and my curiosity came from the church and being around those people when they were in good spirits, when they were going through some things, which I didn't know they were going through some things at the time. Sometimes they would take it out on us, snap at us, or, not be as Christian as they were telling us to be. But yeah, so my children, how how I learned to be, this mother. And I did the same thing my mother did with me, trying to talk to my children and spending time with them and traveling, taking them different places and giving them different experiences and things like that. And that's about the best you can do, and also to let them know about the world, which, that you as a Black boy, as a Black young man, you have to be careful. You have to, mind your P's and Q's and all this. And, my youngest son was, he's incarcerated right now. And he was in our environment. He was in a predominantly African-American community. And there's trouble there. You have to be careful of who you're around, your circumstances, what time you're out, always. And, he didn't do that at that time, and he got in some trouble. So, um, I want to say that time is the greatest teacher. As you go through time, as you get older, as I reflect, and and now when I'm around young people, when I'm talking to my grandchildren, when I'm talking to younger people, I try to give them what I learned, because the older people, the older women in my family, although they did talk to us, they didn't really talk to us about what was going on in the community, the greater community, about the racism, about why, my father, who wrote and spoke 7 languages and was the most intelligent Black man that I knew, the intelligent man that I knew, worked in a steel mill, why he always had to hustle. And, they had, he would do stuff like go, for the steel mill, he would go where Spanish people were, where, the community, where the Hispanic people lived, and take up job applications so they could get a job in the mill. He was doing a lot of stuff for free. And, so I look at that and I think, that I want to be like that. I want to be helpful to people, to my people. I want to be, if I have some knowledge and you're struggling, or if I have something and what I have can help you, then I'm going to help you. I don't even have to like you to help you. I mean, it's not about me, saying, oh, I don't like you, I ain't going to do nothing for you. If I have it and you're there and you need it, or you're asking for it, then my spirit tells me that I need to give it to you, and I need to give it with a good heart. And to me, that's the matriarch. And the patience comes with years. When you get older, and whatever my children are going through, they're grown, I go through it with them. If it's a celebration, if it's suffering, if it's, illness, I'm going through it with you. And I look at my community like that too. I look at my siblings like that. I look at my community like that. Like, I love my community. I absolutely love, our indigenous community, our African American community, our Native community, because we've come through so much. And most of our indigenous communities were matrilineal. It was that mother that had the final say. Sooner or later, you're gonna have to go to mama. Sooner or later, you're gonna be sitting there with mama, and you're gonna get some wisdom, and you're just gonna get some knowledge. And so I like to see myself as one of my aunts. I want to say this about my aunt. Her name was Gussie. We called her Aunt Gussie. And she said, she would say, I had gone to visit her when I was back east. And she said, well, I open my door to everyone's child, because when my children travel, I want someone to open the door for my children. And those are words of wisdom that I carry with me. And I think that, we do the best we can, and then we continue to pray. We continue to think about the fact that who's in charge? Creator's in charge. We're not in charge. And we want, what is the lesson? What am I learning through these experiences? And I always, look at that and question myself first. What am I learning? What am I supposed? And that helps me also when I'm afraid to do something. When I'm, because I've been in a lot of marches, and I would have to say to myself, why am I here? What is my purpose? God, give me strength. Let me do this, and come out on the other side. And blessings, so blessed to have come out safe from those marches and protests and stuff and things like that. So, that's all I have to say right now. Thank you.
Shay. Thank you so much, Stefanita. Awesome. Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? The floor is open. Chief Malo, I see you. Would you like to, anything you'd like to share?
Oh, well, hello, everybody.
Hello.
First of all, thank you, Shatika. Very, very, very well done, and thank you for this topic and for expounding on these different issues and sharing your experiences and everything with us. I wish I was as good a mother at your age at that time. Okay, raising my children. And Sister Carmela, thank you for sharing, and Sister Anita. And the only thing with me is that I believe at the time, and I thought, I made mistakes and different things with my children, raising them up. But I was content in that, well, my kids never used drugs. They were never in prison. They never went through these type of things. But one thing with my children, they were a part of me. And one thing I can say is that I wasn't able to give them the stability that they needed. One, choosing the wrong partner as far as to be with and have children with. And it's nothing you can go back and change. I was stupid. I was ignorant. I was young, 18. And then having my children and in that environment, even though I was very protective over them, the things like even when I was pregnant, I made sure I walked and exercised. I didn't even drink sodas. I didn't, it was just, I paid attention to that because to combat being in with a father, their father, that, used substance abuse, even though I was even ignorant before I even knew that was going on. But to combat that, so that I could give my children, the best possible start. And then, so that was fine. Okay. Doing those things. However, when I say that the stability is like, getting them out of that environment, wanting my children not to come from a broken home. So going back and 2 or 3 times, to try to make it work, to do everything in my power. So over those years when they were young, until finally it was just, nothing else I could do. So I had to raise my children by myself for many, many years. And I had family around me, but to tell the truth, most what I look back is they were more dysfunctional than anything else. Even, and as far as the, and that's just how it was. I did the best you can possibly do, but I was always a survivor and always know that everything depended on me. I had to work to take care of my children myself. My mother, that's one thing she instilled in as far as, and that's one thing and at one point in time, I worked full time. I went to school part-time because I was determined I was going to, try to finish and get my first degree. My children were both in diapers at one time, at the same time, and I didn't have a car. So I've gone through a lot, the different things throughout my life, and the transitions. I've gone through transitions in my life for things with called to ministry, and then, it's just, and then a lot of the struggles, as far as the transitions from one state to another. Because when I was called to the ministry and when I got the word is to come back home, well, it was a two-edged meaning to come back home. Well, I lived in California, but I was born in Arizona. So come back home meant, so I thought, okay, go back to where I was born, but also, God was telling me to come back to him. Okay. So, and I went through those things. We moved probably within 2 weeks. We probably moved like 5 or 6 different times. Okay. And so it's just a lot of transition, a lot of the lack of stability. And then when we did have the home that we were in for about 15 years, it's and that's what question I want to ask. I know Sister Carmela, but I want to ask Sister Anita and Sister Shatika, because did it make a difference as far as not having a father in the home, okay? Not having a father figure. And I know that you have the relatives around you, where most of mine we were separated in distance from one state to another, but there was always the phone. We didn't have internet at the time. We didn't have text, all that kind of stuff, mobile phone. But we, call and to talk and then visit. Made a point every year to drive my children to California to visit with my parents and with the family. And so when I say like the stability was because I really wanted them to come from a stable home environment. I felt like so much of the pressure was on me to everything that I had to do. And then they still, you try to protect your children as much as you can. But like I said, when you're ignorant and you're young and you don't know some of the things, and I was in the church, around the people, and even, there, coming up in it was Baptist, and then Church of God in Christ, and then, just so many different ones. But that's how my life was. It just changed. And so that's what I mean by stability is because my children are part of me and they were with me. So they went through a lot of changes. There were a lot of change in their life, but they were survived. My son, he's in the military, and a lot of people are proud of him. In fact, he's been there like 25 years in the military. But the thing is that I won't go into a lot of things, and some things I cannot. And I know you talked about vulnerability and openness. Well, I am to a certain degree. But somebody in the church one time, and I gave a testimony about some things I went through with my children and what happened to them. And one of the people put me to the side after that. And they told me, they said, that, you may have felt that was a need to testify about that. But I didn't think about, she said, I didn't think about how that would embarrass my children. Well, my daughter wasn't embarrassed, but my son was. But he never told me that. Okay, he never shared that with me, that specific thing. But there's a lot of things that like I said, they went through. And my son, to this day, he doesn't really, as far as the vulnerability and being open, hasn't happened yet. And basically honesty. And one thing for me is honesty. If you're not honest, you have nothing to work from. Then you can't base a relationship unless a true relationship if you are honest and open. Okay, so and willing, like she said, willing to be vulnerable. Well, that's me. I'm always vulnerable all the time with everything, and sometimes to a fault because other people, and just the nature of the person that he is, and I had to realize he's a different person. And no matter what people say, you can love your children, you can love your son, but you as a woman, as a matriarch, you cannot raise your son to be a man. Only a man can raise a son to be a man. You can raise him to have the characteristics that you feel that are needed to have a strength in the character, all these different things. But there are things that I could not teach my son, or I'll put it this way, they were not receptive to them from me being a female. Okay, I don't know if any of the others experienced that, and that was the question I was going to ask to Shatika and to Sister Anita, because I know Sister Carmela, I know that her husband was in the home. Okay, so that's where I'm going to leave it. That's the question that I have, and so did it make a difference? And some advice you might have to other mothers who may have experienced the same thing that I did. And with that, I yield the floor.
Yeah, I want to say in response to what you're saying is that my father was in our home until I was like 12 years old. My older brothers had left for the military, and one of my brothers had got in trouble. He really didn't get in trouble, but they came and took him out of our household. And my other brother, three of my brothers, all four of my brothers were in the military, but one of my brothers, before my dad and mom broke up, they had come and taken him out of the household. And I believe to this day they did that because that's what they were doing with young Black boys in Pennsylvania in the 1960s. They were taking them out of the household and took him away, and he stayed gone until he was like 15. He was 12 when they took him. And this broke up our home. This was what I'm talking about, an outside influence. I don't know what my father could have said to change what was going on in the racist, community we were in. We were good inside that bubble, but outside that bubble, they were sitting around plotting against the people of color in that community and destabilizing our homes. You know, so when my mother was devastated because that was her favorite, that was her youngest son. And then my father, he started not caring. And that's what broke up the home. And so, so as a teenager, he was in and out of our home. We moved, he moved us to another city and left us there. And but my sons had a stepfather. And we had a lot of fun in the beginning and stuff, and he was a good man. He was hardworking and everything like that, but in the end it was just that we grew apart, and it didn't, that relationship didn't work out. So they were around him, and they still to this day respect him. But my brothers were an influence for my sons, you know. So they would do things with my sons, and it was like my father was treated his sons. Now I would say that he abused them, because they believed in spare the rod, spoil the child. And there was a lot of whippings going on against my brothers. And I remember them, and they were brutal. And I think that had a bad effect on some of my brothers, that the brutality, the not talking like my mother would talk. She didn't, even if she did corporal punishment, we would take it and walk. She wasn't brutal like my father was, especially towards his sons. And so I think that was that Southern upbringing of, you got to whip them into submission or something like that. So I don't think there is, I want to, say that, oh, if they're in the household, that's better. I don't think it's better when you're abusing your children or somebody else's child, or so I wish there was a clearer answer, but that's just my experience. And I've seen other experiences where there are good men, not good men, but men in the household who were good for the children, and the children grew up to be, go to college and be successful, So we just have to, stay in prayer and stay, like we're, in the MAAT and the matriarchs, and, stay in prayer for our community always.
Yes, that's right.
I know we're getting close to
Hey, thank
wrapping
you.
up, so I don't want to take too
No,
long.
we're long-winded.
But I can just, for me and my experience, I do believe that it's vital for children to have the balance of feminine energy and masculine energy. But I do believe that you can raise a young man to be a man without having a man present. I think a lot of it stems from teaching them what you need, and they learn to step up as a man in the household because they understand it's their job to protect and nurture and take care of mother as well. So a lot of my perspective is, how do you condition them? Like, there's certain things that I think you should you should have to put aside as a woman and do with them to enjoy their side of nature or their character and their nature. And then also, you have to tell them how you are as a woman and teach them and format for them how you expect them to be observative and considerate of you as a woman. You know, the not hitting women. I think that that's naturally something you teach them. If y'all playing and they hurt you, you say, "Oh, they hurt it," and you let them know, like, "Okay, mama a little bit more softer than you. You're a man. You're strong." You know, and that you can not realize your strength at times, and eventually they become aware of themselves. And naturally, what we're doing is we're just raising conscious individuals, and
Right.
their character traits, as far as being manly or more, casual and lackadaisical or feminine, I think that stems from just what they're attracted to. You cannot really control that, you know. Having a father around sometimes makes that a little bit less predominant, but I've seen men be there, be tough, play basketball with them, football with their sons regularly, quality time with them regularly, and they still end up raising feminine men. So I do believe that it's all about how you appease to their nature as a man, being that you're a woman, and then also how you put aside your feminine nature to meet them at some places. I play football with mine regularly. I, get out there, play basketball with them. We ride the bikes together. I just try to engulf him in the things that he enjoys as a man, and respect that he's a human just like anybody else, and whatever his desires and interests are, I just have to support him. So I do believe you can raise a man without a man being present.
Thank you so much, Sister Shatika. I think I see Chief Malo's hand up.
Yes, I want to tell Sister Anita and Sister Shatika for that. And I guess when I'm saying as far as a mother raising a son to be a man, I wasn't really thinking in terms of any type of sexual orientation, but I was, and I know that wasn't just part of it, but the other is if that individual, that son, has to be receptive. Okay, if you have, even if the in our case, my ex-husband was not in the home, he still had a big influence when I would make sure that my son could try to go and visit with him, and I didn't know at the time. It took a long time. My ex-husband would say terrible things about me. So that was he just had that bitterness within him, and it still is there today, believe it or not. And I don't understand that. He's been married 4 different times. But, and so, and the other is that not being there a lot of times really, really, really hurts the children. Just because, like, I think someone said one time, it's hard to make mistakes when you're not there. Okay, so everything comes down upon the single mom. Everything comes down there. All the pressures and everything is there. So you have to look in terms of I still think in terms of like the mothers today, and it's good that you're doing this because like I said, there's a lot of things that are available today and support that they can reach out to that I didn't have a lot of. I did, like I said, we had family and around us, but like I said, and there were some very good ones, and there were some that there's certain things they just didn't talk about. It's just subjects, they just didn't share and talk about. And I didn't understand that because I'm, like communication, everything open, and I was ostracized because of that, because I want to, and so, and you can't do a whole lot to combat. Like I heard Sister Anita saying that you have people who, the outside of your little cocoon, so to speak, you can only protect to a certain degree, and you can raise them. You can raise your child, and like I said, and the scripture says, in a way that they should go, and when they're older, won't depart from it. But I still feel that there was some damage that was done. Just the fact that my son, I don't hear from him. He will not talk to me, but it's him. And it took me a while to realize that he has the issue. He has the problem. You can't do anything when people do not talk, when they don't want to be open, when they don't want to be honest, when they don't want to just for whatever reason and resentment that they hold. And it took a lot of introspection on my part, and I'd see things I could have changed, I could do differently. And with now, you can't heal a relationship. I mean, you can't do it by yourself. It takes two people, and they have to be, it's for communication. And his wife that he has now, married for the second time, she just says, not to me, she said to my daughter, well, it's best that they don't talk. And Tracy had to let her understand, well, what about when my grandson, like when your son gets older, you think that that's right, that you and he do not talk for whatever reason. So this is crucial. This is something, and this has been good, for me, for us to explore this issue, because I know that there are other young women out there going through the same thing right now, the very moment that we speak. And some of them are dealing with, which I didn't really encounter, but they're dealing with the domestic abuse, okay, because of a lot of things. Some of them, believe it or not, are dealing with abuse from their own sons, okay, in their homes. And it's just a lot of things, and those things that we later, as we move forward, okay, and I'm sure when we hear from the Patriarch speaks, we'll get another perspective also on this. But thank you so much, and you're correct that the mother, she can, in that sense of in the context that you were talking about, raise the son to be a responsible individual, a loving person, okay, all the good traits and those things. But like I said, you can do everything in your power, and you can speak and you can show them. But there are some that they're bound up, they're hard-headed, they don't want to listen, they want to go their own way, and they're gonna do. And sometimes you just have to, like what Sister Anita said, you have to let go and you have to let God. You have to put everything in God's hands, and trust that whatever you made mistakes, but whatever you did during that time, the good things that you did will take root and take heart in them, and you just never give up on them. My arms are always open to my son to come back, and he has to come back, and that's when I know when he comes back to me and humbles himself too, and I can tell him I'm sorry for the things that weren't the way that they should have been. But he's not even around in order to listen for me to even say that. Letters, those things get returned or not read or whatever. So you can't do anything, like I said, when there's no communication there. Okay, but my heart, I'm always hopeful. My daughter calls me the eternal optimist. But that's I know that things will be the way they're supposed to be, and in a time. And Sister Anita said that it takes time. It's just time, and over time, things will be the way that they should be, and that relationship will be healed. Ashe?
Hey, Ashe. Thank you all so much. Thank you for your openness, your honesty. Thank you for, like Sister Shatika said, being open to share your vulnerabilities, your experiences. Thank you all so much. And that has been amazing. That will conclude our episode of What Needs to Be Done today. And next week, we're going to have our speaker, Sister Carmela Mitchell-Bay. She is going to speak next week, April 30th at 6 p.m. Eastern. And with that, love you all. Thank you all so much for being here. Have an amazing week. Peace and love.
Peace and love. Ashe.
Love.
Peace and love.
You're not looking anybody. You're looking